Don't obsess over the weight. Obsess over the form. Chest up, shoulders back. Welcome to Revival Fitness, everybody, your home for gains and brains. I am finally going to reveal everything I do in my training to get these juicy, succulent 3D delts and how I've gotten them up to this point naturally. So before we dive into this, guys, I do want to make one quick note, because a lot of guys have a hard time with this. They think if you acknowledge genetics in any capacity that it's excuse making or hating or anything like that. So we do have to acknowledge that briefly, guys. Some people are going to have an easier time building the kind of capped delt look than others, simply based on their parents. That's just simply how it is. So some of you guys may have to do very minimum direct delt volume and your delts are going to grow like mine do. Other people, you might have to do more volume and you still might not get the results that you're seeking, at least in terms of the classic bodybuilding look. And keep in mind this too, guys, whenever you see these pictures of IFBB pros, very successful bodybuilders, 99% of the time they are directly injecting stuff into their delts for years and years and years. You see some of these guys where their delts are at like complete right angles. So don't fret over reaching these insane IFBB pro standards, guys. If you have even decent shoulder strength and upper body strength in general, you're gonna have better delts than the vast majority of the population. And with that said, let's dive into the first kind of main component of my delt training, which is going to be some type of pressing movement. So we're going to start focusing on a shoulder-specific press, and you guys are familiar with the main variations, right? You can use a barbell, you can bring it all the way down to the collarbone, or do something more like a military-style press, where you stop more so at the height of the chin. Depending on your overall shoulder health and genetics, I've kind of changed my tune on this in recent months, guys. I used to always preach only go down to the collarbone. I think, though, if you want to stop a little bit shorter, maybe like here or so, I don't think that's the end of the world. In many cases, I think it could protect your shoulders better than lowering all the way to the collarbone for a lot of people, especially if you have longer arms like I do. So we have the barbell variations. You could also use things like a Swiss bar or another type of specialty bar. I'd say that's less likely for most people. And another popular option here is going to be dumbbell presses for the shoulders. And I want to stress this point, guys. I talked about this recently in my upper body workout vlog. You see so many people in the gym and they half rep the mess out of this exercise. They barely lower their arms to their ears in a lot of cases. I've seen guys even go less than 90 degrees with the arms when doing seated or standing overhead press with dumbbells. It's a complete disaster. But I do like dumbbells for the very reason that you're going to be able to, at least I'm able to, turn my wrists in a little bit more. You could also switch to something like a neutral grip. And like we mentioned a minute ago with the Swiss bar, if you don't have access to like a Swiss bar or a trap bar, something you can press with overhead with neutral handles, the dumbbells allow you to do that in a way that the barbell simply can't do. But no matter what variations you focus on or choose to do or like to rotate into your training, even if you vary up the rep ranges too, I think one of the most fundamental components of shoulder training is going to be your kind of core standard front delt focused press. Now some guys are going to mention too here that you could swap out incline bench and incline presses for a standard more vertical press. I would tend to agree with that. I've never gone extended periods in my training personally without some type of overhead press in it, at least not in a long time, so I can't really speak for any direct effects on that. But I do believe if you do a sufficient volume of incline pressing in addition to the other shoulder work we're going to talk about, I don't think OHP is necessary per se. Is it beneficial? Yes. Do I think all beginners should learn it? Absolutely, I do. But I do think that an incline style bench press, namely at 45 degrees, maybe even up to 60 degrees based on your equipment, I think that could replace this type of movement if you would like to try that too. Because that leads into the next point here, and this is often very overlooked when it comes to delt training, your chest training and your chest pressing. So a lot of people seem to forget that your chest training and your pec work is going to work the front delts too. Not as directly or as much as a vertical up and down shoulder press, obviously, but your front delts are going to be worked considerably if you're doing flat bench press, dumbbell bench, maybe things like push-ups. I would say dips, at least in my experience, don't work the shoulders as much as the flat bench does. I do think the dips are going to work the shoulders, especially the lower down you go. And if you're somebody right now who does not have access to gym equipment, barbells, dumbbells, whatever it is, maybe you just don't want to pay for gym memberships, you're training at home or in the park, whatever the case might be, you're going to want to focus on decline push-ups to really hit the delts. And if you get very advanced down the line, you could even start to do things like assisted handstand push-ups. Basically, the farther up your feet go when doing a push-up, guys, is kind of like the inverse of a bench press, right? The further up your feet go, the more shoulder you're going to work with that movement. But if you're getting sufficient pressing volume for both your shoulders and your chest, I don't think most people need to focus on the front delts any more than that. And as we're going to talk about later in this video too, the vast majority of people, even lifters, have overdeveloped front delts compared to the rear delts. And that's also an injury risk if you've been in that situation for a long time. So don't solely focus on the front delts because that's all you see in the mirror, guys. The side, of course, and especially the rear delt, they're just as important in this scenario. So with that said, let's move on to what I do for the side delts. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, it's the algorithm. So when it comes to side delts, guys, there's really no way to directly target these things without a lateral raise. Quick pet peeve of mine, you will commonly hear people say stuff like, what about side lateral raises? And it's like, that's so redundant. Side lateral, it's the same thing. That's like saying basically vertical up. What you're seeing on the screen now is going to be a full unedited set of me doing my lateral raises at the gym. But I will do this until I get about 12 to 15 reps is what I usually aim for. I've been with 20s for a while now. Guys will also do this too, right? Guys commonly will start to shuck and jive and throw their hips up and tilt to the side and stuff. They like to get more body English involved when doing lateral raises because that allows them to increase the weight. This is a side delt isolation exercise, guys. Do not worry about upping the weight +5 every single week. Nobody can cleanly lateral raise 40s in general. Very, very few people, okay? And most of you guys are novices, and you'll hit me up and like, I'm doing 25-pound lateral raises for sets of 15. No, you're not, bro. Not with clean form. So what I want you guys to think about when doing this lift, quality over quantity, okay? And think about basically, for lack of a better term, a snow angel motion. Now your palms are going to be facing down, which is a bit different than like a typical snow angel you would do. But you're going to do that same exact motion, right? Basically, like there's two drawstrings attached to your wrists. They're going to pull you up, lower back down. Don't pause at the sides. Don't take this extended 5-second rest and then pop your hips up and jerk your knees. Right down, right back up. This is going to keep the tension on the side delt the entire time. So once I do that, I get my main full range of motion out of the way. Keep the same weight in your hands. I'm then going to do a drop set, but this time with partial reps, and I'm going to do it until failure. And when it comes to side delts, guys, this is basically the only muscle group that I can really vouch or advocate for doing a partial range of motion for, at least on a regular basis. I got this idea from John Meadows because I used to kind of scoff at partial lateral raises myself, but I tried these out a number of months ago. If you have a good mind-muscle connection and if you're not using body English with these, the side delt pump is insane. So I will do these until I essentially just can't lift my arms up anymore. But we're not done yet, because once the partial set is done, I'm going to do another drop set, half of the weight, or you can do whatever percentage you'd like. In this case, I'm going from 20 pounds down to 10 pounds. We're then going to do a set with the 10-pound dumbbells to failure. And you could even do partials at the back end of these too if you'd like to. I don't think it's totally necessary because we've done so much as it is. And guys will commonly ask too, can I do this for the overhead press or the bench or whatever? The reason this is so feasible, guys, for something like a lateral raise is because it's so light. There is essentially no full body fatigue happening here. And one last quick little hack here. I don't know if you guys can tell this based on the angle of this video. And again, I don't claim that this makes some massive difference. This is something I've just experimented with myself. But whenever I do lateral raises like this, guys, I do a thumbless grip. And I've even let the dumbbell handles kind of roll into my fingers. I'm not even really gripping them per se. They basically kind of sit and my fingers make a C shape, and they kind of just rest there because they're so light that they don't fall out. This is a bit bro science-y, I understand that. But if I let these things kind of just caress in my fingers, and I use the same cues I talked about, like the drawstrings on the wrists, the snow angel method, I feel these so hardy in my delts, guys, and you've seen the pictures I take in the gym, right? My delts get an insane pump when doing this. And I think that's really all you need, because keep in mind too, guys, your main pressing is going to work on the front delts. Not directly speaking, not as good as these lateral raises can, but it is going to work on the side delts too, even if you can't feel it that well per se. And that's going to tie into the final part of this video, guys, from front to back, the rear delts. And rear delt work too is going to work the side delts as well, just not as directly like we said. But in terms of rear delts, guys, this is what's going to make or break that 3D look. So like we mentioned at the beginning with the pressing movements, your pulling movements are going to be the main cornerstone of your rear delt growth. That's mainly going to be in the form of rows, I would say. Pull-ups and chin-ups are also going to work those. I would say pull-ups do more so. But I think especially with rows, namely with rows whenever you're going to be able to fully stretch your arm, especially like a one-arm dumbbell row where you can kind of cross the body a little bit, let the arms really extend. In my experience, those are great rear delt builders. And I do have a video coming up about all my back training philosophy too. Stay tuned for that. So when it comes to the isolation of the rear delts, I would say that a reverse fly motion, a reverse raise motion, those are pretty much your two primary options. Now, you could argue that face pulls are going to be good for the rear delts, and I've said before, guys, I think face pulls are overrated for directly isolating the rear delts. Once again, you're not going to be able to totally isolate a muscle 100%, but the face pulls, I think, are going to incorporate more trap than a lot of people would be looking for with the rear delts. And if you're like me, you have genetically very dominant traps, you don't really need more trap volume than you're already getting. So don't think, guys, just because Athlean X talks about face pulls a lot, and again, they're not a bad exercise per se, I give them to a lot of clients myself, but I personally believe that some form of rear fly or raise is a better option to target the rear delts as much as you can. And my favorite way to do this is going to be on the reverse pec deck. I think this is perhaps the most rear delt isolatory, is that a word, exercise I've ever done, namely because you're sitting, there's no real potential for leg drive. And then how I do this too, the little hack I use, if you can see I have on wrist wraps, a lot of people will kind of hold the interior pegs on this machine, right? They kind of hold their hands in a pronated position and they will push out. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but in my experience, using a hammer or neutral grip here hits the rear delts more so. But it's a similar strategy to the lateral raises, right? You're gonna kind of fan your arms out, keep them extended the entire time, bring them back in. Right before the machine kind of hits into itself, push them back out again. When it comes to these single joint type of movements, it's all about quality over quantity. Don't be so obsessed with always raising the weight on the stack. You can even do something as light as 40 to 50 pounds in many cases for a set of 12 to 15. Your rear delts are going to be on fire here. I myself do this with about 100 pounds or so for 12 to 15. And again, I'm more experienced than most of you watching this. And when it comes to this motion too, the reverse pec deck is going to be really the heaviest thing that you can do. Because the next option is going to be something like a reverse fly with dumbbells. Most people are going to do this bent over like you can see me doing here. So the bent over reverse fly, I'd say, is the easiest to do simply because all you need to do it with is dumbbells. If you see in this video here, guys, I am sitting on this plyometric box. Anything where you're going to be able to sit down, or especially if you're going to see in this clip here, I'm doing these on a seal bench. If you don't have access to a seal bench, you could potentially stack a normal height bench up on plyo boxes or on bumper plates if that's feasible for you. But anything whenever your chest is going to be prone on a surface, if you're sitting down, I think those are generally better for isolation style exercises than being on your feet. because being on your feet is very good for the bigger movements. It has the most carryover to real-world activities, obviously, compared to sitting. But once again, we're talking about isolating aesthetic muscles here. And even if for not aesthetic purposes, if you're doing even rear delts for something like rehab, you want to hit them as directly as possible in the time allocated to them that you have. But a lot of guys neglect them, at least for too long, or whenever they do start training them, they still use too much momentum, they jerk around, they're obsessed with adding more weight. Don't obsess over the weight, obsess over the form. So I haven't really been doing many drop sets with the reverse flies myself, but you're welcome to do that if you'd like to. You can also put these in between pressing movements a little bit earlier in the day to kind of give your pressing muscles a break, even if briefly. Some people even like to do their rear delt work at the beginning of their workouts, and I can understand that too. We were talking about face pulls a little bit ago. I like to do very light band face pulls at the beginning of my upper body days, only like 1 or 2 sets. I barely even think about it when I do it, but just to warm up those muscles in the upper back, once again, those kind of slouching muscles that are very tight for most people, especially if you sit in a car, at a desk, in school all day. Those are going to be tight in general, even if they're already pretty strong for you. So if you're one of these guys now who skips out on deadlifts and especially bent over rows because, oh, it hurts my low back and stuff, I'm not saying you're lying, but it's probably your own form that's causing the pain, not the exercises themselves. So don't blame these exercises, guys. Make sure your form is buttoned up on both the compounds and the isolations. Take this advice, implement it, make sure you're eating sufficiently if you're not already now, and I can promise you that your shoulders are going to be bigger in a few months than they are already. And this has been it, guys. So a big shout out as always to the Patreon supporters and the channel members. Stay tuned for members-only Q&As on the Discord server. Reach out to me in the links down below for custom coaching, consultations, and programs to fit your individual circumstances. And I will catch you guys next time.